Welcome again to the SundayGorilla Men's Bible Study. I'm Brother Thomas Lee Harris III, and we're continuing in our study that we have entitled Pain in My Black Church. Let me set my timer. So I want to try to keep it under 10 minutes so it's quick. You can hit it on the YouTube, hit it on the Facebook, and it'll flow quick if I keep it real short and powerful. Alright, so in this study, we're going to go to, as promised, the Old Testament, the book of Numbers. The book of Numbers, chapter, that's the name of the book, Numbers, chapter 14. Okay? Numbers is after Leviticus and right before Deuteronomy. Right? Alright, here we go. Chapter 14, verse 1. So all the congregation lifted up their voices and cried. And the people wept that night. Verse 2. And all the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron. And the whole congregation said to them, if only we had died in the land of Egypt, or if only we had died in this wilderness. Why has the Lord brought us to the land to fall by the sword, that our wives and children should become victims? Would it be better for us to return to Egypt? So they said to one another, let us select a leader and return to Egypt. Amen. All right, just a quick history for those who haven't read this before. God's chosen people were in captivity in Egypt. After moaning and crying, God sent them a deliverer, right? With a plan to bring them out of Egypt. Right? They were enslaved. So I want you to see that God's chosen people were slaves. So in this message, Pain in My Black Church, God's chosen people were slaves. And this word is continual. It reveals itself in context for today. So the black church, which came out of slavery here in America, is consistent to God choosing a people that is enslaved. Alright, so in this chapter what we read is, now they came out of Egypt from slavery and were in the wilderness. Right? So God had promised to take them to a promised land, to a safe place, a land of milk and honey. But in that journey, they met opposition. Right? In this case, it was the Amalekites, where they assumed that they were going to go from slavery to freedom, real smooth, no opposition, easy as pie. And what happened is they met opposition and they started to complain. And as we saw here, they picked new leaders and they was going back to slavery. And that's what I want to bring in context to our message, in context for today, to the black church. We were freed from slavery. Right? We were brought out of slavery. But there is false prophets who have risen up consistently since we've been out of slavery, and have gathered together and said, like they said here in chapter 4, let us pick new leaders And it says go back to Egypt, which means and go back to slavery. Right? So it's a possibility that the local congregation that you gather with on Sundays, that we call our black church in our community, is actually working as a group of leaders who have selected to return to Egypt. Because Jesus said he came to heal the sick, to give sight to the blind. Right? He says in John 10 that the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. Jesus says, I give life and life more abundantly. So the obvious formula to anybody who's studied a little bit of schooling, if we've had the local black church in our community for 50, 60, 100 years, and all they're producing, or the members of the body of that church, when you go to their community, is destruction, sickness, disease, death, that's not of God. You see, it's not the enslavement. That's where God rescued us from. Enslavement was the misery. God brings us out of slavery and heads us to the promise. But it can be, it takes time, and there's obstacles in the way. There are obstructions in the way. It's not a smooth ride. But just like this, what happens, the leaders will gather together, as we confirmed in Peter also, in the book of 2 Peter we read that false prophets will arise. We'll get more into that. Right, false prophets will arise and have arisen in our churches, and I'm stealing from that again, in our local congregations, and have set up a doctrine that is heading, right? Verse 4, so they said to one another, let us select a leader and return to Egypt. Right? We're gathering in congregations that are in doctrines that are trying to take us or keep us consistently in a pattern of going back to Egypt, back into slavery. Slavery in the mind, the body, and the soul. It is in the spirit that you control that direction. Jesus came to set us free. Chosen generation. God promised us some things. If we take heed to His commandments, if we are obedient to His word. So the pain in the black church, in my black church, is the disobedience. Because with that disobedience, that means if I'm disobeying God, that means I'm obeying the devil. And I'm obeying his doctrine. And that's why it's the sickness, the disease, the death, the mess. Amen? So, I'm going to end this study on that. And it's to give you time to ponder. It is the local congregation that you're attending, has it selected a leader that has returning you back to Egypt, back to slavery? Amen. God bless you.